A significant severe threat is playing out across the South as we move into the final weekend of December. It's rare to have a threat this significant this time of year, but all the same threats are there that we would see in the spring. Tornadoes, wind, and hail, and this threat will even carry through the South all the way to the East Coast as we move through the next couple of days. So in this video, we're going to break down these threats, the timing, and at the end, we'll also take a look at an overall pattern change that will impact the entire U.S. as we begin the month of January. Now you can see to the right of me here, this is our severe weather outlook as we move into Saturday the 28th, and what you're seeing is this pretty significant bullseye across much of our Gulf Coast states, anywhere shaded in yellow and orange especially. That's where you have to be particularly aware of this threat. Areas shaded in orange include mainly Louisiana and Mississippi. That's where our threat is going to be greatest, and it's being fueled by moisture off the Gulf and wind energy coming out of the north and west, and that's what's really going to make this the centerpiece of our severe weather threat. And if there is any severe weather in December, typically it's in this area. Now we can also take a look at the individual threats. We'll start here with what is going to be a tornado threat, and there you can see those areas shaded in yellow, especially with those hash marks through them. That tells us that's a significant tornado threat. This isn't just a run-of-the-mill day where there may be tornadoes. This is has the potential to be an actual tornado outbreak, at least at a localized level in this part of the country. Anywhere shaded in green at least has a chance to see a tornado out there. That includes places like Nashville, Houston, Tallahassee, so it's a pretty broad area. Beyond this, we can take a look at the threats, including damaging wind, which is going to be the most likely threat of the day. Again, centered right here in this area between Louisiana and Mississippi, but extending pretty far out, similar to our tornado threat. And we can also take a look at the severe hail threat, although this I am less concerned about. It is more conditional with our storms, and we'll talk about why here in a moment. But before we move on, I also want to show you that it's not just going to be these first storms that show up. As we head into Sunday as well, we have a severe threat, and this extends as far north as places like Pittsburgh, though it will be marginal. We are looking at a more significant threat to our Gulf Coast states. That includes places like Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even Virginia has the potential to see severe weather here, and that threat extends into northern Florida. So let's jump into some of our data and take a look at the timing and the look of these storms, what they may seem like on radar. To get an idea of how our storms are going to behave, we need to take a look at what's going on above our heads, and I'm going to show you our jet stream right here. Whenever you're seeing those pink and red colors, that indicates a lot of wind energy aloft. And also what you're going to see is we have a trough here. This is going to begin to move more to the east. And as it does, you're going to see that wind energy pick up in places like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And here we are on the day of our severe weather. You can see pretty clearly, here's our trough digging in, and there's our jet stream bringing a ton of energy to those areas that are going to see severe weather right there. So if we move this forward too, you're going to see there's still plenty of wind energy, and our entire system shifts eastwards on Sunday. Now our trough is oriented like this, and your wind energy now spreading across those East Coast states. So that's why we have at least one main ingredient for severe weather, but we, of course, need instability too. And I'm going to show you that here as well. Remember those states where we saw that strongest jet stream? Here we are on Saturday. You know, a lot of times we don't have enough instability for severe weather in the winter, but here you can see we clearly have enough coming off the Gulf Coast that we have that more conditional threat. But of course, there is a pretty good crossover of wind and just overall energy out there. And that's where we're going to get the potential for severe weather from. So that's your ability to create storms. And here we are the next day. It's not a lot, but it's enough. All you really need is some of that gray color you're seeing to create severe storms. And like I said, it's conditional, but you can see some pockets of energy even farther north than our main area in the south and east. And that is why we have this threat in place. Now we're going to take a look at our simulated radar, give you an idea of what storms may look like on the ground. So I'm going to break it down here. We're going to go to our simulated radar. We're going to move this into Saturday, and here we go. This is Saturday around noon. You can see storms begin to pop up in Louisiana, so that's when our threat officially begins. You're going to see all these storms begin to shift to the east, and as we do, you're going to see a lot more pop up. So here's our look as we get into the afternoon on Saturday. Again, it's going to be a couple clusters of storms, but you can see in the middle of these segments, there may be some individual cells. That's where we may have the highest tornado producing potential in there. And eventually, as we get later into the night, you're going to see these storms develop into lines. Kind of on the very edge of your screen here, you can see a line of storms there. You can see another line of storms here. Notice this kind of looks like a Boeing segment, makes that sideways U shape, that's where we're going to have the greatest damaging wind threat. So that's going to evolve as we get later into the evening. You're looking at after dark hours right here. So that's how our threat emerges and plays out. I can even show you, just to give you an idea of what I'm looking at, in more depth. If we take a look at some of our, we call this a sounding. This is what we're looking at for your Saturday threat. I know this looks complicated, but really all we're looking for here is essentially this space right here. See that difference between the white line and the red line? Basically, all that space in the middle there. That tells us basically there's a lot of energy in the atmosphere. We can look at some of these numbers down here. They tell us how much colder the atmosphere is getting with height. It tells us how strong those updrafts and downdrafts may be. And over here, we can see, if you see that curving shape, that tells us that there's a lot of curvature in the air, a lot of spin for tornadoes. And here are storms moving in on Sunday. This is earlier in the morning. This is actually pre-dawn. You can already see those colors brightening up across our risk area, which extends outwards like this. So early on, if you're in Georgia, before the sun even rises, you may have the chance for some strong to severe storms. These storms look a little bit more linear until we get into the day. That's when there could be a few stragglers in front of the line. I believe we may see some discrete stuff here, but this is more so going to be a line of storms. Also worth mentioning, this is a warm front over here, and that warm front is why we have the potential to spawn some storms a little bit farther north. Question remains how much cloud cover there is in the morning. The more cloud cover, the less that this area is really going to be in play. The less cloud cover, the more broad our threat is going to be. So that's what we're looking at here for Sunday. Here we are Sunday afternoon. Our main event is ongoing. Once we get towards the evening hours, it begins to make its way to the coastline. Still has a decent chance to produce some strong to severe storms here. If we can get the instability, the question is how far north does that get? It seems like there's, again, that potential all the way into southern Pennsylvania. But after we get after dark, so right around here and onwards, while it does look like there's a lot of color up there, I don't believe we're going to see severe storms because we lose the instability. Still need to watch out here along our Carolina coastlines. But we're done. Once we're out after the night ends, we're done. Even though you're seeing these bright colors, these will not be severe storms. That'll just be heavy rain. So it goes all the way to sundown. And again, we can take a look at that sounding like I showed you before. Here's a sounding for our next day. This is for your Sunday, and what we're seeing here is less energy comparatively, but still we have that spin out here, fuel for tornadoes. We have less instability here, so I'm really not so concerned about hail. I believe there may be a 5% out from the SPC, but hail just is not as concerning with this one. But that said, there is still some strong wind and pretty low to the ground, so damaging wind threats, especially as those lines develop, will be something that we really need to pay attention to. So I'm thinking damaging winds are primary threat, tornadoes are secondary, not as concerned about hail, but certainly something we will be watching. Now, before we wrap up the video, I'll give you an idea of that overall pattern change that is set to unfold and is really going to turn things around as we get into the start of January and may feature some snowier weather for parts of the country too. So here's a sneak peek at that pattern change that's really going to make a difference as we start the new year, and especially if you live in the East, might be time to get a little bit excited at least about the potential for some snow. But we're looking at overall a very mild air mass here as we begin the year, and this means temperatures, generally speaking, aren't going to be cold enough for snow. So I wouldn't really expect much as we transition into the new year. But here we are. This is the 28th, the 29th, the 30th, and now this is New Year's Eve. What we're now seeing is this cold air it's begin to penetrate into the United States. Still very warm out there, but we're looking at a change beginning to occur here. So as I move this forward, you're going to continue to see the difference as that cold air spills across the U.S. So it starts off, this is New Year's Day, it starts off spilling into the central U.S., but it hasn't settled yet. As we move farther into the first week of the new year, this is now Saturday, January 4th. You can really see that cold air setting up in the east. And on the flip side, here's our counterweight, some milder air in the west. So where we go from here gets interesting. We haven't had much sustained cold, especially in the east, in the past few winters, but it looks like this one's going to be different. And as I move this forward, you're going to see that cold air anchors itself into the eastern U.S. We even have some supportive shots of cold air here as new weather systems dive into the U.S. And the fact that we see a bit of activity, even with cold air staying in place in the east, suggests that we may have some storms that end up developing and impacting portions of the east. And that would likely feature snow if we can get that. And I got to say, as a snow lover, I'm more excited about this than I have been in a long time in the east. Move this forward a little farther just to show you that here we are. This is the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, even the 11th. cold air really shows no sign of letting up. And to be completely honest, it looks like we may even squeeze some more days out of cold air sitting in the east. Meanwhile, it is much, much, much warmer out here in the west. Again, that's our counterweight, and it is not going to let up very easily. So if you live in the western U.S., I'd expect it to feel more like, November, even in early spring in some spots as we get into that first part of January. I'm certainly going to be watching the western U.S. for the potential at a few rainfall events, especially the Pacific Northwest. But in the east, we'll be watching closely for some of those storms that may try to bring snow across a good chunk of the area. I mean, even the south is in play here for some snow too. I wouldn't call it likely at this point, but it's a possibility. And the farther north you go, of course, the more likely it is you're going to see some snow in this window as we see some real sustained cold for the first time in quite some time. So thought that might be exciting news for some of you. And if you're in the west, maybe it's because you like the mild weather. If you're in the east, it's that potential for snow and cold. But certainly two things that we'll be watching very closely, and we're going to keep you updated. Of course, you'll want to like and subscribe here. We do these updates every Sunday. We usually bring you a special update in the week if the weather calls for it, or just to say hi, check in, give you the latest on what I'm tracking. But be sure to check back here for more, and we'll always have the latest. You can even check out some of the shorts we got going on and anything. We put more fun stuff on there. But be sure to tune back in. We'll have your back with the weather, and make sure you stay prepared for those severe storms if you're in the southern U.S. this week.